It's rivalry week, which means that there are a ton of games to talk about and a ton of upset potential. I'm going to talk about 6 games today. So, with the intro out of the way, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're going to be previewing Week 13 of college football, starting off with Oregon State at Oregon. This is a matchup of two teams that are built fairly similar, but one just has a little bit more talent, okay? The spread is Oregon minus 13.5. The over-under is 62. I think this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game, and I tend to agree with that. I also think that Oregon is, on paper, about 2 touchdowns better than Oregon State. That being said, I thought the same last year, and Oregon State won, and pretty much just handled business in the second half of that game. Oregon kind of let their guard down, and Oregon State, with Coach Smith at the helm, is a for-real program. The game plan for Oregon heading into this game is going to be load the box, stop the run, which is easier said than done because Oregon State's running backs and offensive line is very, very good. But the game plan is going to be stop the run and make DJ Uiagalelei beat you throwing the football, because we think we have the athletes on the perimeter in order to be able to stop them in one-on-one situations, and DJ Uiagalelei is not the caliber of quarterback to be able to transcend his talent. That, I believe, is going to be the game plan for Oregon, at least defensively. Offensively, it's just going to be do what you're doing. I don't particularly think Oregon State can match up with the physicality and the speed that Oregon possesses, because they have both of those things in spades. So this is a little bit of a mismatch for me in terms of talent between these two teams. However, Oregon State does everything that you need to do in order to upset a team that is more talented than you. And what you have to do when you do that is you have to create turnovers, which Oregon State is fairly good at. And you also have to have one thing that almost nobody is going to be able to stop. And for Oregon State, that's been the run game this year. When they've needed it, they've gone to it, and pretty much nobody aside from Washington has been able to deal with it. That being said, I do believe Oregon is just too much for this Oregon State team, and I think there is also a little bit of a revenge factor going on after what happened last year, and especially for the manner in which Oregon lost. So I think Oregon is going to pull this game off at home by a score of Oregon 38 and Oregon State 24. Next game we're going to talk about here is the big in-state rivalry for the state of Kentucky. Kentucky versus Louisville. Both teams are of a similar style here. They don't particularly ask a whole lot of their quarterbacks, and generally speaking, just want them to be efficient with the ball and not to turn it over. The run game is where both of these teams thrive, admittedly one more so than the other, but both have been very good in the run game compared to like an average team. So this is going to likely be a ground and pound defense-oriented football game, which explains the over-under, which is being set at 50.5. Louisville is favored by about 7 points, and I think both of those numbers are damn near on the money. These are two head coaches and programs that I have a lot of respect for. One, because of the conference they're in, very clearly has a much higher ceiling than the other, that being Louisville, who has a real chance to win the ACC this year. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they do have a real chance to win the ACC this year. Kentucky, the best that they're going to hope for is a win over their rival at this point. They were 6-5. This season didn't particularly go the way that they wanted it to go. They're still a solid team, and if they weren't playing in the SEC, I think they might have 2 or 3 more wins. But that's a conversation for another day. When it comes down to it, there are 2 things that I think really separates these 2 teams here. One is named Jawar Jordan, and the other is the fact that this is a home game for Louisville. Louisville has both of those things going in their favor, which is why I'm going to predict Louisville to win by the score of 27-20. I think they're a better football team. I think they have something that they can go to and just get 3 or 4 or 5 yards every single play and not have to particularly worry about Kentucky being able to stop it, because I don't think they are able to stop it. So I just think Louisville is going to win this game, and they're going to walk into the ACC championship with a 11-1 record. Moving on to some group of 5 action here. San Jose State versus the University of Northern Las Vegas, UNLV. This is a win and you're in game for the Mountain West Championship. Both of these teams have had great seasons so far. They're both bowl eligible. Now, in the case of San Jose State, they are 6-5, but they're 5-2 in conference because their 3 out-of-conference games were against teams that they were never going to be able to beat, like USC and Oregon State. It's also worth noting that they played Toledo as well, which was a sneaky, interesting matchup. However, Toledo did win that game. UNLV, on the other hand, only 2 losses are to Michigan in a game where they actually played pretty decent against a very, very good Michigan team, and Fresno State, who, despite not being in contention for the Mountain West title anymore, is still a very consistent and very good program that has a good chance at getting to double-digit wins this year, assuming they don't get shafted in the bowl game that they play in. But when it comes to this matchup right here, San Jose State versus UNLV, these are 2 teams that can score the football at a fairly high level, which is why the over-under is at 58.5. I think that's a little bit low, but that's just me. I also think UNLV is more than 3 points better than San Jose State, but not by a whole lot. I don't think that's an unreasonable line. Now, this game, I think, is going to come down to who can get the 1 or 2 stops in the red zone or can get a turnover when it matters. And I trust UNLV more than I trust San Jose State when it comes to that. So I am predicting UNLV to win by the score of 35-27. It's also worth noting that Air Force versus Boise State is also a win and you're in game for the Mountain West Championship game. However, that game is not nearly as interesting as this one. I think Boise State's going to handle business fairly easily in that game. So I think the Mountain West is going to be UNLV versus Boise State. The big one, Alabama versus Auburn. The one that everybody waits for every year and has been one of the best rivalries in all of college football over the past 10 to 15 years. Auburn here has a chance to play spoiler for Alabama's comeback season and prevent them from getting into the playoffs where they should be, if I'm being honest. Now, Vegas and I are of similar minds in terms of how far apart these 2 teams are. The spread is 14.5. The over-under is 49. I think the over-under is just about spot on, but I think the spread is a little bit low. I probably would have put the spread at like 20. I think Alabama's going to come out and just destroy Auburn. Auburn had a fun little moment where they kind of caught Georgia with their pants down and they didn't really know what they were doing defensively, and how they kind of got a couple of big plays and made it look close when they really didn't have any chance to win that game. I don't think that's going to happen for this game. I've got Alabama handling business here by the score of 35-14. I think Auburn probably scores a touchdown in the 4th quarter with like 4 minutes left after Alabama has pulled all of their starters to make it look just a little bit better. Next game I would like to talk about is Jacksonville State University versus New Mexico State University in what should be a play-in game for the Conference USA title for whoever gets to lose to Liberty. I'm going to be honest with you here, right here, okay? I didn't particularly put this game on here because it's an extraordinarily interesting matchup. It isn't really. Jacksonville State is not eligible for the postseason because they moved up from the FCS 2 seasons ago. So they have to stay away from the postseason for 2 seasons for absolutely no reason at all. There is no rationale for that rule to be in place. There is no reason why, if they are bowl eligible, they shouldn't be able to go to a bowl game, or if they're eligible for a conference championship game, why they shouldn't be able to do a conference championship game. There's no reason for this 2-year probationary period that the NCAA is inflicting on Jacksonville State and James Madison as well, although they are not in the same conference. New Mexico State is favored by 2.5 points here, but I think Jacksonville State is actually the better team, and it would just be way more narratively satisfying if Jacksonville State won this game here. It would kind of be like a fuck you to the NCAA, and I'm always on board for that. Now, either way, New Mexico State is going to play Liberty in the Conference USA title game, but Jacksonville State should have the right to go to the conference championship game. And it's just crazy that they're not allowed to. And that's the real reason why I put this game here. But I do think Jacksonville State is going to pull off the upset. Final game here is Florida State versus Florida. And after what happened to Jordan Travis, this game becomes a little bit more interesting, unfortunately. Florida is 1 win away from bowl eligibility, and they have the opportunity to play spoiler to a Florida State team that just lost their superstar quarterback. I believe that this game has upset written all over it. Now, I'm not the only person that believes that, but I think Florida has a real chance to pull off the W here. It's at home, and they do have the necessary talent to be able to beat this Florida State team. But Florida State has their back against the wall. They are now all of a sudden a team that needs to prove themselves in order to make the playoffs. When before the injury, they were just a team that needed to handle business. But that's not the case anymore. I do not believe that a 13-0 Florida State team would make the playoff over a 12-1 Pac-12 champion, if that champion is Oregon, okay? So, hypothetically, even though they're 13-0, I do not think Florida State would make the playoff, and the ACC would be the ones left out to dry in the final 4-team playoff, unless Florida State comes out and makes a statement against Florida and convincingly beats Louisville. Not just they've got to throw together a drive to kick a field goal to win the game, or it goes in overtime. They need to win by like 10 points. If that happens, then I think Florida State would make the playoffs. But if that doesn't happen, I do not believe Florida State will make the playoff. As far as what happens in this game, I think Florida State finds a way to just barely survive the onslaught that is going to be this rivalry game for them, to limp into the ACC championship game with a 12-0 record and still a legitimate chance to make the playoffs. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So at this point, I'd like to remind you to like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if at any point in the video you disagreed with me or you just have something to say, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below. And that is all that I have for you today.